Welcome to Retirement Reimagined, a series of conversations exploring the latest FNB retirement survey and what it reveals about the average South African's preparedness and attitude towards retirement. In each episode, we delve into the survey findings and examine interesting themes, including the perspectives of people over the age of 60 regarding their retirement journey. We take a realistic look at the financial requirements for a comfortable retirement and the obstacles preventing us from taking action to meet our retirement goals. I'm Maya Fisher-French, personal finance journalist, and today we're discussing how second careers or side businesses are becoming an important part of people's retirement plan. I'm joined by Sizwe Nxedlana, CEO of FNB Private Segment. So Sizwe, I found when I was looking at the results, what was so interesting to me is this increase in the retirement age. People are starting to retire later and later. What do you think is driving that? Can we just simply not afford to retire, or do we want to work? What do you think is the going on behind those figures?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of several factors. The first one is 90% of our survey respondents indicated that they weren't ready for retirement, in the sense that they hadn't saved sufficiently for it.
90%?
Yeah, whereas 10% had said that, they were ready to retire and
Can I want to just clarify that. So this is people over the age of 60, obviously.
This is over people over the age of 60. Okay, so then I think the second thing is we've also seen that health outcomes have significantly improved. So there isn't a need per se, physically and mentally. People still have the energy, people still have it in them to be able to carry on working. And then in the higher income segments in South Africa, we are also aware. So for example, in the private banking space, 54% of our base are self-employed people. And so this retirement age is actually a corporate salaried employed concept, which one would then have to assume that becomes irrelevant if you're an entrepreneur running your own business, and whether it's a small enterprise or a medium-sized enterprise or even sort of a medium corporate. It's at your discretion when you eventually decide to retire.
Well, those are some really nice things that I think I'd like to unpack further. So I want to start sort of with this idea of being underfunded for retirement. You know, you work in the wealth segment, right? So you're talking about higher income or affluent people.
Yeah.
So that's people, earning 750,000 or more a year.
Yeah.
What I'm picking up is that in this segment, they actually struggle. It's really difficult for them to retire because they have a standard of living, obviously, that's much higher.
Yes.
They may need 100,000 Rand a month to live on, which obviously for other people sounds like a huge amount of money. But when you've been earning 2 million a year, that is your standard of living. And people are very reluctant to, on retirement date, suddenly halve their standard of living. And I'm finding people saying to me, well, I haven't saved enough because to have an income of 100,000 in a month in retirement, you need 30 million?
Correct. And so what we do, just to become a little bit more granular, is we do bucket. I mean, this private banking or wealth space is actually not a monolith. There are a lot of sub-segments within it. And so what we do is we will further sub-segment it by income and balance sheet. So affluent being sort of at the lower end of the wealth space. And then we'll have wealth, high net worth, and ultra high net worth. But we'll also then add an additional overlay to that balance sheet and income statement subsegmentation to say, so are you affluent, retired, or are you affluent, salaried, or are you affluent, self-employed? And when you start having that type of metrics, you can then start to see certain outcomes or behaviors and so on. And we do find that a lot of the strain or stress is in that more entry part of the private banking market. And a lot of people there suffer from what I would call lifestyle inflation, because people tend to then keep up with the Joneses, as it were, and as the salaries increase or incomes increase, they're still accumulating assets. A lot of them have school children, etc. And then you may not break up or break out of those habits such that you kept your lifestyle at a certain stage so that you can have a higher surplus that you can then start dedicating to savings and investments. And I think that's one of the key strategies that we're trying to pursue, to say we are trying to be income statements and balance sheet optimizers. And so please start by seeing an advisor. And it's not even about the products or solutions. It's actually getting someone who can help you see the future, paint appropriate scenarios, so that this thing starts to become less anxiety inducing, and then put a plan in place and just help you behave in a way that's in your best interest, and also just start telling you about the people that are doing well in your situation look like this.
Yes.
And then all of these things turn from bad habits into good habits, and then we can somehow start to mitigate these outcomes that you refer.
And it is so true, and I do think so much about it, and especially that segment will tend to be employed, as you said, and it's that change jobs, cash in, pay off debt, put a deposit down on a house, buy a second home, a holiday home, buy the bigger car, and so when somebody says, oh, you got retirement one day, oh, I'll figure that out, I'll leave it later. But if you're needing 30 million rand to retire, best you start quite early, because time, of course, is one of the best ways to, to accumulate your wealth for retirement. So difficult one.
I just wanted to add that a lot of the times it's really simple mental shortcuts that a qualified advisor who maybe has 500-600 other clients, and there's a distribution of those clients. Some of them who are really financially prudent, some of them are sort of middle of the road, and some of them are doing less well. Someone who can just coach you and hold your hands and then advise you on the appropriate solutions. And those good habits can really make a massive difference in just changing one or two lifestyle traits that over a long period of time can have really beneficial outcomes.
And I also want to talk a little bit about the way that you accumulate wealth as well. So, you and I were having an off-air discussion about the Reserve Bank figures, which showed how many people are living off dividends in their retirement. Now, to live off dividends is a plan. You don't, on age of 65, wake up and have a dividend portfolio, right? You have to have started accumulating and building your portfolio for that dividend income over time. So again, it comes down to having that advice really early on in your career, so that you are building up these diversified income streams. So you've built up maybe some property, a share portfolio with dividends, your traditional retirement products. All of those come together as part of the final solution, which then obviously can also be very tax effective, but it starts so much before. Everyone hopes that they'll sit down with the advisor at 65 and the advisor will suddenly pull out some miracle for them.
So the SOB does indicate that especially in the higher end of the spectrum, people who have started early, or some of it has been inherited, or it's entrepreneurs that have then sold businesses and entered into diversified portfolios. But there is a large chunk of income in South Africa that's earned by through dividends or returns from assets, and it can be a broader set of assets, including dividends from portfolios, but also property seems to be quite a big asset class amongst the wealthy in South Africa. The issue is it seems to be highly concentrated, which brings me back to my point, and I think you've alluded to it as well, is there is a cohort, even in the higher income brackets, particularly in that entry higher income, where you do need someone who's going to sit you down and not talk in jargon and so on, just help you paint a picture. Maybe I'm 30 now, maybe I'm 40 now, I've got a wife and kids, we've got a family. Have that family conversation that paints a pragmatic picture of what life could look like in 20 years' time, and then work backwards in terms of what you need to be doing now so that picture is the optimal or successful
because
picture.
One day you're going to get to that point. But I think for a lot of people, Sizwe, their idea is that I'll just work longer, okay? And what also came out for me, what was very interesting in the survey, was how few people actually knew their company's retirement age. Now, we'll talk a little bit about the self-employed, but if you are employed at a company and you're thinking, well, I'll just keep working, sometimes there's a cap. The company actually has a retirement age, and not that many people actually were aware of it.
And yes, and so this is something that's becoming a little bit tricky. And I think it's a function of people not putting these things off, not really engaging, because your HC department or your human capital department is there. There's a financial services institution that's quite well developed, but we're finding that people aren't engaging sufficiently with all of these tools. And it's a trick in the industry that I think we're missing in terms of how do we become more effective at getting people to take step one. Just gather the facts internally in your company, understand what the rules of your pension fund. Some of the stuff is even in your monthly payslip. But I mean, you'd be surprised at people that don't even look at their payslip.
I'm picking this up completely. People have never looked at their payslip, and then they say, "Oh, what are those strange deductions going on?"
Exactly. So it's just getting someone to help you just understand where you are, so that you start understanding some of the things you talk about. What's my retirement age? And then how long before I have to retire? And what am I going to need when I get to that point? And what do I need to be doing now? The second thing it then brings me to is, I think we spoke about this earlier as well, is, again, there's better health outcomes. And so,
I mean, do we want to be retiring at 60? I mean, goodness.
Exactly. And you are seeing, from a corporate perspective, as a consequence of some of these health outcomes, retirement age is starting to go up. What you're also seeing is, especially in our part of the market, people have skills that are scarce in South Africa. So you do have people that are in the fortunate position where there's a dearth in the supply of those skill sets. And so these people can be in a fortunate position where some of their contracts get extended. We are also seeing some corporates increasing their retirement ages. But I think it's still the responsibility of the individual to plan way before the fact, because there's also more optionality because of what we're talking about, where you can now start a second career or start a business, or go into other mutually beneficial activities that add to society and also continue to give you an income going forward.
And I think that is a very important discussion is, obviously you may have somebody who's always had their own business. And for them, retirement is just a number. I was actually speaking to a very high net worth, very, very, very wealthy individual in South Africa I won't mention his name. He's nearly 80 and he is still active and he loves work and it's what gets him out of bed every morning.
Yeah.
But for somebody, maybe they're in a corporate environment, but they've got to start thinking, wait a minute, I actually want to have longevity. I don't want to stop working at 60, even 65. So you do also part of that retirement planning, well, when I say retirement planning or leaving the corporate world planning, is to start saying, how do I use my skills and start working for myself, being self-employed, giving myself that option. So again, these are not discussions you start having with yourself at 65. You need to start this at the age of 50.
Exactly.
And again, it comes to having those conversations much earlier than I think we're used to having them.
And also a diversification of your skill sets 5, 10, 15 years in advance. Some people are working in jobs out of pragmatism and it's not really their purpose or passion. And we do pick up from time to time people who plan ahead, who then say, actually, I'd always been very interested in this. Online education is now ubiquitous. And so you can also start upskilling yourself in something that you maybe really wanted to do when you were a youngster, never got the opportunity to do so. And then by the time you hit retirement in inverted commas, you can then branch out into that purpose. I suppose the point I'm making is there shouldn't be an anxiety-inducing thing. It should actually, because of the opportunities, especially for the affluent, there's so much out there from a retirement planning perspective, but also from a second career perspective, and also potentially business opportunities that if you plan well before the fact, the world is full of opportunity.
And I think it's important that we are talking specifically about a segment, which is your segment, which is the affluent segment. It is difficult. I don't want to gloss over that. For many people, this is very challenging.
Exactly.
But certainly, if you are in the affluent segment, start thinking about retirement. Not retirement as in you're going to put your feet up and watch the daisies grow, but retirement as in being able to have the freedom and flexibility perhaps to continue to work, but have options. And I think that really is what we're doing. And how do you get there? You plan. You start having the conversation as early as possible. Absolutely. So thank you so much, Sizwe. And I think for me, this has been a very, very valuable conversation. And for those of you who want to know more about the survey, you can go onto the FNB website, fnb.co.za, and download the survey there. And please tune in for the next discussion, because Sizwe and I have been talking about, about how much you need to retire. And that's exactly the conversation I'm going to be having with in our next episode. So please tune in.